Scott Thompson, better known as Carrot Top, rose quickly in the stand-up scene. His first prop was a neighborhood watch sign which he stole. How good of a watch was it if he could steal it, he asked. He quickly became a staple of The Jay Leno Show, often appearing on Leno's New Year's Eve episodes. But the criticism, and being the butt of the jokes, started to pile up. Carrot Top publicly didn't mind, as he stated in an interview, "I had this card, piñatas we'd like to see, and there was Bill Clinton, a couple others, and a little picture of me with a noose around my neck. I was like, this pisses me. Wait, it's a Hallmark card? It's like they're paying homage to me." In 1998, Carrot Top starred in his first movie, Chairman of the Board. What was a fun movie for kids was decimated and browbeaten by critics as they lambasted its very existence and Carrot Top's own right to exist. This is the story of Chairman of the Board. Director, Alex Zamm.
Chairman of the Board, which was my first feature opportunity, and I was so happy to get an opportunity. It's so hard in this town. You either have to write or direct your way into it, and I was fortunate that Trimark offered me that film. It was an open directing assignment. It was being produced by Peter Lenkov, who had produced some of the Pauly Shore movies. Now he's producing MacGyver and Hawaii Five-O, and so he was producing this film with the comedian Scott Thompson, Carrot Top, and they were looking for a director. So I came in with a pitch, and the guys at Trimark had seen some of my work, my shorts before, and I was awarded the show. I know that the script was a little more. It was written as a Pauly Shore vehicle, and was asked. I knew that they wanted to make it for Scott Thompson, Carrot Top, and so I just said, look, because of he's more playful. Pauly Shore is an overgrown child character, but he's older, and Scott Thompson felt a little younger in terms of the persona and his inventiveness. So I just thought that we should embrace Carrot Top's inventions and all the kooky things that he makes, and make that part of the film and give it more of a, let's say, a Pee-wee's Playhouse or Pee-wee's Big Adventure type feel. And I always like to my pitches were, let's go inside of his brain. And so in the kind of the film is filtered through a subjective point of view. So even the opening when you're in the womb is him telling a story through his exaggerated point of view. And then later we go through into his ear, and we go into his stop motion animated brain where we see all the crazy workings. So I just said I would try to infuse it with that sensibility. Yeah, and I think that was my background, which was gag cartoons and short films and animation. So there is this kind of a heightened quality to both using wide angle lenses, and even some of the performances are heightened. It's, I always like this point of view, and I've done it in some of the other films I've done, which is it's not how things are, it's how you remember them that counts. So that when you're older in life and you remember your own childhood, sometimes things seem bigger. Buildings are bigger, and there's an exaggerated sensibility. And so I thought this was filtered through Carrot Top's heightened point of view. The whole film, the production design, everything had a dialed up quality, which I think fit his character. The world was stylized to help him embed more, as opposed, he's already going to pop out as it is with that red hair and his stylized personality. But I thought at least elevating the world a little bit stylistically would help him embed into it a little bit more. But I had never seen his act other than on television, where he was a guest, and was aware that he was an inventor, and he was an engineering student actually, who had a real inventive ability and could see how to turn objects into the setup or the punchline of a joke. I always felt it was unfortunate that he became the punching bag for so many, or the punchline to so many other comedians, that they felt that props were a crutch. And I just think comedy can be visual or physical or verbal. It doesn't have to be one thing. So no, I wasn't that aware of him. So I flew out with Peter Lenkov and the executives from Trimark to go see his show in Northern California, and it was just an amazing experience because he was selling out. He had an interesting mixed audience where kids were coming to see him, and a lot of college. He was really huge in the college circuit, and then there was families going to see him, or older people seeing him in Vegas. So he had an interesting demographic that wasn't singular. So it was a little hard to pin him down who his audience was. They wanted it PG-13. There's always been this unfortunate sense that G films are a bad word, and that they wanted to make it suitable for, I guess, the films that were done for Pauly Shore prior to this. So they were trying to get a little bit of an older audience. But I agree with you. There isn't really a lot of sexuality or violence or profanity, so it doesn't really click a lot of those boxes. But perhaps it was just enough that it did that, or maybe there was Cindy Margolis who's really provocative. But I think that there was a desire for it to be, if I remember correctly, that it was desired for it to be PG-13, not PG. If I were to do it over again now, the lens of time is really, you always learn a lot. It's not with regrets, but just an analysis. And then I think Scott's comedy, uh, whereas he did have a big college and Vegas audience, I think that the sweet spot for Carrot Top's work is that he's a sweet, ingenuous, overgrown child, and perhaps it would have been better to go the route that was probably more my sensibility at the time, which was to go for Pee Wee's Big Adventure and make it a PG movie, even G or PG, and make it really a kid's, much skew it younger, and not involve anything involving sexuality, or Estelle Harris with a voice box, and that stuff that would have been less, perhaps take away the less kid friendly stuff. If I were to do it over again, I think that would have been Scott's a better business plan for Scott's comedy. You have a lot of partners. I came onto a script that was written by Terry Meyer and Al Saptine, and for Pauly Shore with some very specific things. I had producers and the studio who wanted certain things out of it, and my own sensibility, which I think comes into a lot of the visual humor, and the elaborating on Scott's inventions, and a lot of the stylistic stuff. But look, any film is a team sport, and there's always voices who are guiding it, including Scott's managers at the time, and Scott himself. So I think it's, you're always trying to steer the ship, and as a first time feature director, you have only so much influence in it. But I was grateful for the opportunity and grateful for as much influence as I did have. I did a pass as an overall pass, because it was a long script and we had to get it down in length, and we had to make it work for the budget. So I was constantly tweaking and rewriting, Alan Turry's script just to make it work for Carrot Top. I worked really closely with Carrot Top to try to get his voice and his input. Peter and I spent a lot of time with him, just trying to make sure that the stuff was tailored to him and his inventions. And then there was a wonderful cartoonist named Pippa Gardner who drew all these crazy future inventions, and so I'd always loved Pippa's work and wanted to use it, and made a deal to have access to some of her work. So she had the Real TV Dinner. That was something that I added, that I had seen in Pippa's work, and because whereas Scott's comedy, so much of the inventions are one-off jokes, we needed something that was part of this company that Scott took over, that would lead to something that would influence the company. So that was something that was kind of like outside Scott's wheelhouse. So we were able to use Pippa Gardner's ideas and her drawings, and those work great. Comedians are often really good listeners. That's why they often transition so well to comedy and television, is because they're listening to the audience. So Scott was really wonderful. He has a good sense of what's funny. He was fearless in terms of the physical comedy. He always went for it, and he has a warmth about him. He's kind of wacky, exuberant, childlike warmth. And so my job and the job of the team was to try to support him and capture that, and let him be him. Look, we weren't trying to be, wasn't trying to do De Niro and big emotive scenes, but just to make him try to find some scenes where he would drop the mask, and we would see that he really cared about doing the right thing, and he cared about his friends, and he cared about the company, and he really liked and support the love story. make them real enough, but like Pee Wee and Pee Wee's Big Adventure, those are stylized, over the top characters, and you have to try to ground them in places. And Scott was capable of doing that. He was a pleasure. I look at it as that's my job. He as long as someone comes in with their lines and and even if they don't, I as long as I know the point of the scene, I can support an actor and help them find their what they need to do. I mean, he was great with Jack Warden too, and Jack is, I mean, we're talking about a legend, and it was an honor to work with him, and he was just so generous. All the actors who came in, Larry Miller, all these people, Raquel Welch, everybody, Jack Riley, everybody was so generous with Scott and supporting him as an actor. I think it's like you're playing tennis with somebody. Your game goes up when you play with a better player. You're always trying to figure out tone, and it has its own rhythms, and it influences the production design and the cinematography and the performance and the editing, and every choice is informed by this desire for this feeling you're trying to transmit to the audience, not the plot, this feeling, which is tone. And I think that if I were to go back, the thing I learned is that there are certain elements in the film that I think I would have skewed it younger. I think Scott would have made a great younger family film or star. And his inventiveness and his ingenuousness and his kindness and his wackiness would have really, really translated to like an 11 and under group. That's what I would have, or 12 and 11 and under. That's what I would have shot for across the board. And that would have been, I think, the removal of certain elements from the movie and certain tonal things. But that's hindsight, and that's a great, not regret, just hindsight.
If the film was expected to spread goodwill among non fans, it did not. The reviews of the film were written in scorched earth tactics. This is how David Cronke's special to the LA Times opens. Carrot Top, whose frazzled, fight-wiggy red locks remain his most developed gag, inspires marvel among many in the comedy world, mainly because he still manages to find work, despite and almost utter lack of talent. The payoff of one episode of The Larry Sanders Show, in fact, hinged on the fact that he's an execrable comedian. Why the guy agreed to be on a show in which his own ineptitude was a punchline is bewildering. Maybe he hoped he'd seem hip, being such a good sport. Or perhaps he just doesn't get sophisticated humor. Let me point out here that the film has not even been mentioned yet. And even when Carrot Top is in on the joke and pokes fun of himself, he is still not allowed to be part of that joke, according to the reviewer. If you're expecting the review to be glowing from here, it doesn't get any better, and goes on and on about his ineptitudes. Cronky goes on to compare him to Pee Wee, but then says Carrot Top is reticent to bring the sheer level of crazed commitment to his persona. So basically, he's an irritant who can't stay in character and can barely deliver his lines.
No, I'm not, to be honest with you, I don't read reviews. I find them debilitating and static. I really don't read any reviews. I learned that a long time ago, and I just don't. To me, it's just noise. I'm not trying to in any way denigrate. There are terrific reviewers out there, but reviewers who are thoughtful see what someone tries to do and succeed or fail, and their critique has a thoughtfulness to it. But there's too much of a culture of hate, and to be honest, I'm more interested in making things than in stopping to think if someone is going to be hateful, or even, like, I don't read positive or negative reviews. It's none of my business. My job is to make things. You want your work to be received well, and it was disappointing that it wasn't received as well. And yet at the same time, here you and I are talking, and I do hear frequently from people for whom the film was a positive experience for them growing up. So look, there is the old expression of taste, there's no dispute. There's an audience for everybody. And I don't think Scott has a mean bone in his body, and his comedy doesn't. And so for another comedians or the reviewers to rip on him for his unique brand is I don't know. I think it's limiting to what comedy is. No one ever accused Chaplin of, he would take a broomstick and turn it into a dance partner or to a prop. I don't think anyone. He and Keaton are brilliant physical comedians. I'm not comparing Scott to those guys, but I'm saying that there's all different types of comedy: silent, verbal, physical, visual. I think there's a lot of room for everybody. I'm sorry that people didn't feel there was enough room for Scott. Some people didn't. We always tried to be supportive of Scott's brand of comedy. That's the job, and to help place him organically in a narrative. Whether people like the narrative or not, that's none of my business. My job is to tell the story as best I can with the resources I have. You want your work to be received positively, and you hope that you put it. It's the reason why you do it, and you want to connect with an audience. It's not a selfish act; it's an act to make people happy. And I was disappointing that it received some of the negative, as many of the negative reviews. Actually, it's really disappointing that it received any negative reviews or mean-spirited ones. Negative is fine, actually. I take it back. Mean-spirited reviews, that's the disappointing one, because that's where it's not really journalism. It's just hate writing. So I felt bad for Scott. I felt bad for everybody. Trimark, Trimark. I thought we could have had a bigger release, to be honest. Trimark is a small company, but what happened was they had a terrible release with two other films before there, and Starman and some other film, and they got killed in the marketplace, and so they could not afford at the time to release the film on more than I don't know how many screens it was, to be honest. 100 screens, 200 maybe. Actually, less than that probably. So anyway, they got killed in the marketplace, and they didn't have the resources to advertise it properly. I think they could have found a bigger audience for the film, to be honest.
In spite of these reviews, director Alex Zamm has always maintained a positive experience about the film and what could have been.
Look, one always wants your film to connect with as many people as possible. That's why you make it. And if it doesn't connect, or it becomes a cause celeb for somebody to hate on, that's their problem. My job is to make new things and wonderful things and funny things, and to learn from each experience. I mean, that was a great learning experience. It helped me. The act of making it made me a better filmmaker, and made me. You don't learn it unless you fall down a couple times or get egg on your face. And it makes you also really respectful that everybody who faces a blank page or has to assemble 90 minutes of movie, it's tens of thousands of man hours. And I root for every movie that I see, friends, even strangers, other filmmakers, because what goes into it. And I don't think anybody tends out to make a bad movie. I mean, if they did, it would be a strange hobby. Stamp collecting's a lot easier to do than this job. At least they got up and they tried. So my attitude is, whatever I learned, I've taken those lessons and continue to learn, and on every movie. And I excited about the next, 50 years of making stories.